My cousin laughed at my empty wallet, and everyone else laughed with her. My name is Mara Ellison, and I have learned how to measure a life with receipts. I keep them folded in a rubber band, tucked behind the flour canister, away from drafts and pride. The bakery pays me by the hour, the office downtown pays me by the invoice, and my sleep is paid for by the silence between those two jobs. It is not glamorous, but it is honest, and for a while I thought that would be enough to keep my head above the noise. We were at Nana's Sunday table when Cassidy decided to perform. Cassidy is my cousin, the one with glossy hair and a voice that carries. She was chewing a piece of roast beef, smiling at the aunt across from her, when she pointed at my scuffed tote like it was a stray dog that had wandered into church. "Mara," she said, the word sweet as syrup, "I saw a tote just like that at the thrift store. Yours is vintage, right, not desperate." The table paused, the room tilted, and then came the laughter. It started like rain and turned to hail. I pressed my thumb into a water ring on the table, and breathed. Nana set down the gravy boat, her eyes flicking between us, as if she could lift the temperature with a look. My mother's hand touched my knee under the table, a quiet anchor. I wanted to say something biting, something neat and terrible, but my tongue knew better. You do not win anything by yelling in our family. All that gets you is a new story they tell without you. There has always been a scale in our town, and Cassidy knows how to lean on it. She posts photos at rooftop parties, she orders drinks with gold flecks, and she talks about work like it is a game she invented and already won. When I got laid off from the furniture warehouse, she sent a bouquet shaped like a broken heart. When I started nights at the bakery, she joked on Instagram about my dough girl era, and our cousins sent crying laughing emojis. The comments collected like lint. You survive those moments by shrinking. You become the girl who is busy, the girl who will take the late shift, the girl who brings the lemon bars to wash down everyone else's jokes. You say, "It is okay," and you wash your hands until the hot water becomes a kind of prayer. I told myself that things were not as bad as they looked. The car held on, the numbers in my notebook added up, the rent cleared even when it left my throat raw. I had a plan that stretched from one Friday to the next. After dinner, I carried plates to the sink. I watched the bubbles rise, thin and bright, and wondered who I would be at 30 if I kept my head down. Behind me, the conversation continued, and Cassidy's voice climbed like ivy. She teased me about a bank account I surely did not have, about goals I surely could not reach, about a future that sounded like a locked door with my name scratched off. I stared at the faucet and counted to 10. That was when I noticed the drawer. It has been in the kitchen my whole life, the top left one with a sticky corner, the one where Nana keeps the warranty cards and the deck of cards with a missing queen. It stood open a half-inch, careless, like an invitation. I wiped my hands, reached in, and felt paper edges under a bundle of rubber bands. A small white envelope rested on top, the corner marked with my name in my grandfather's careful hand. The old hurt in my chest shifted. I did not open it there. I slid it back, pressed the drawer shut, and finished stacking plates. When Cassidy hugged me goodbye, she smelled like too sweet perfume and easy victories. She whispered that she could help me find work if I could stand to carry something more than bread. I smiled and thanked her, the way you thank a storm for passing. In the car, the night pressed against the windshield like a soft wall. My tote sat heavy on the passenger seat, holding nothing more dangerous than a notebook and a stale granola bar. I put my hands on the wheel and exhaled. The envelope was still in the drawer, waiting. The fact of it radiated through the house and into my bones, like an ember ready to decide what it would become. I drove home with the taste of dish soap and something like hope. The next morning, I wrote the week on a yellow index card and taped it to the cabinet. Monday, 6 a.m. bakery, inventory and muffins. Noon, nap, 27 minutes. 2 p.m., bus to office downtown, reconcile petty cash and print checks. 7 p.m., bus home, laundry. Tuesday looked the same, a slightly different song with the same chorus, and on it went. Work was a rhythm I could dance to, even with blisters, even while the world insisted I had 2 left feet. On Tuesday night, I opened the kitchen drawer at Nana's again. I was supposed to drop off a container, an old habit of returning things that did not belong to me. Nana was in the living room with the TV volume low, her ankles tucked under a blanket. The drawer still stuck at the corner, still squeaked when it gave. The white envelope waited, crisp and light, like a held breath. I took it out and slipped into the hallway, the light from the window silver on the wallpaper roses. My name was not written like a label, it was written like a promise. Inside the envelope, there was a single folded page and a small brass key. The handwriting was neat, stern, my grandfather's script. He had been a foreman at the mill, a man who knew the price of wood and the weight of a word. For Mara, the letter began, who keeps a ledger and a steady hand. There is a savings account made in your name when you were 6. It is for quiet building. Use it when the ground under you is ready. The date was 12 years old. My throat went tight. I wanted to believe that something as steady as a bank account could have sat under my life this long. I wanted to believe that my grandfather had seen me, not in the way of hashtags or holiday toasts, but the way a carpenter sees a joist and knows where it belongs. Still, it felt improbable, like finding money in a coat you have not worn since high school. I folded the letter and put the key in my pocket, a new weight, a small bell. The consequences of Cassidy's jokes reached farther than a room. The next morning, an aunt texted that maybe I should skip the cousins' lake weekend if money was tight. A friend from high school sent me a link to a budgeting app, as if I had been living without numbers until now. At the bakery, customers ordered pastries like they were buying applause, and I smiled because that is what you do when you hand people sweetness in a paper bag. At lunch, I took the bus to the bank. Our bank sits on Main, a square building with clean windows and a clock that is always 5 minutes fast. Inside, the air smelled cool and floral. I had never come here with purpose before. My banking happened on a cracked phone screen, the numbers moving like skittish birds. A woman with a nameplate that said, M. Ramirez, looked up and greeted me with a softness that made my back straighten. She guided me to her desk, and I placed the letter and the key on the wood like an offering. I think, I said, careful with the words, there might be an account. She read the letter, her face unreadable, and then tapped at her keyboard with quiet authority. I watched her fingers move, and listened to the low hum of the printer behind her, and tried not to hold my breath. After a while, she nodded. There is, she said. There is a savings account and a certificate of deposit, both under your legal name, established by your grandfather. They have been accruing interest. We'll need to verify your ID, and I can print the balances once we do. For a second, the carpet seemed to tilt. I passed over my ID. She photocopied it, made notes, and then pressed a button. A printer sighed and began to live. She handed me 2 sheets of paper, heavy and warm, the numbers arranged like a patient flock. The balances were not miraculous, at least not in the way of lottery winners and champagne. They were steady. They were enough to change the angle of my days. Ms. Ramirez watched me read, her mouth softening at the corners. He left you a message in the account notes, she said. Not everyone does, but he did. She turned her monitor and let me see. There was a line in the system, short as a breath. For her work, it read, and for a life that holds. My chest filled in a new way. Quietly, a room inside me added a window. Cassidy's laughter fell away like a bad radio station at the county line. I could pay off the car. I could move from my windowless studio. I could stand in a room with her and not feel like the dust on her shoes. I folded the printouts and slid them into my notebook. I thanked Ms. Ramirez, who shook my hand like she was placing something back where it belonged. Outside, the clock was still 5 minutes fast. I walked past the old mill, now a brewery with string lights and couples in quilted vests. I thought of my grandfather walking these same blocks, his boots heavy, his hands steady, his eyes taking the measure of everything. I thought of the way he used to tap my notebook with a blunt finger and say, "You keep track, kid. The world will try to make you forget." The vow rose without noise. I would keep the account private, and I would build. I would meet the next family dinner on my feet. Two things happen when you hold news like that. The first is relief, slow and warm, that spreads like sunlight over the counters. The second is terror, sharp and quick, that whispering voice that asks if you are the kind of person who can hold a good thing without breaking it. I had slept next to scarcity long enough that abundance felt like a stranger at the door, polite and insistent, carrying a pie I did not know how to cut. I phoned the only person who ever answered me with math instead of drama. Her name was Louisa Tran, my neighbor across the hall when I still lived in the windowless studio. She is a notary and a paralegal at a firm that handles estates and small business filings. She had watched me carry trays of day-old bread, and I had watched her bring home stacks of manila folders like quiet towers. When I told her about the letter and the printed balances, she said, "Come by after 6, bring the papers, I'll make tea." Louisa's apartment always smells like lemon oil and old books. She read the letter twice, then read the account notes that Ms. Ramirez had highlighted with a yellow pen. She asked if my grandfather had ever mentioned investments. I shook my head, but remembered the catalogs addressed to him for lumber equipment. Louisa pointed to the CD, to the renewal dates and the rates marked in untidy bank shorthand. "This has been rolled over 3 times, she said. He said it, then trusted time to finish the work. He also noted, "For education or enterprise." That is a blessing, but it is also a discipline. "I do not want to blow it," I said. The words were small, but they filled the room. "You won't," she answered, with the kind of certainty that unmakes worry. "You keep ledgers. You show up. You will use this exactly the way it was intended, and probably in a way that makes someone cry in a good way." We mapped my debts on a legal pad. The car had 3 payments left. My credit card, the one I used when my mother's prescriptions fell between paychecks, could be cleared. Rent was a weight we would not lift until we could. Louisa suggested I leave the CD intact until the next renewal, and use the savings account to reset my footing. "Let success arrive quietly," she said, pouring tea. "Let it come in like morning light." On Friday, I returned to the bank with Louisa. She wore a navy blazer and carried a folder that made me feel capable by proximity. Ms. Ramirez recognized me and smiled like a small bridge. We set up online access, updated my contact information, and added a note to keep mailings discreet. Ms. Ramirez asked if I wanted a new debit card for the savings account. I shook my head. "No card," I said, steady for the first time all week. "This is not for takeout. This is for life." At night, I lay on my futon and listened to the radiator knock, big as a heartbeat. I thought of Cassidy's jokes, the way she lifted them with 2 fingers, graceful, sure. I thought of how poverty sharpens the senses, how you can smell condescension across a room. The next family event would be Nana's 75th, 2 Sundays away. It would be held in the church hall, with punch and sheet cake, and a slideshow of photos that made our lineage look tidy. Cassidy had offered to handle the party and asked for donations in the cousins' chat. When I sent a modest amount, she replied with a thumbs up and a joke about Mara's bakery budget. The replies animated themselves like a swarm. I scrolled back, up through months of her small cuts. The time she tagged me in a post about girl bossing on a budget. The time she told me to wear flats to a work event so you do not trip over ambition. The time she took Nana shopping for a dress and sent a photo captioned, "Isn't she the cutest?" as if our grandmother was a dog in a sweater. I set the phone face down and looked at the ceiling. Resolve does not feel like thunder. It feels like a new shelf installed where you can reach it. I decided to fix what I could fix without spectacle. I paid off the car. I paid the credit card. I set up an automatic transfer each payday to the savings that was not the old savings, a new habit beside an old gift. Then I went to see the church treasurer, a tinkerer named Arnold who had repaired my toaster once with a paperclip and charm. He sighed about the roof that kept leaking over the west aisle. He sighed about the property taxes that caught Nana by surprise every year. He sighed like a kettle and looked at me with kind fatigue. How much to patch the roof before winter, I asked, and how much to cover the taxes in advance? He named numbers with the care of a man counting loaves. They made my stomach tighten and then ease. I can do that, I said. Arnold stared, then smiled the way a man smiles when a puzzle piece fits at last. I asked him to keep my name off the bulletin and the announcements. I wanted an invoice in Nana's name, a receipt for her file, and the work done before the party. He nodded, as if he understood the physics of a quiet gift. On my way out, I ran into our pastor, who hugged me so hard my ribs hummed. "How's the bakery?" she asked. "Busy," I said, and this time it sounded like a blessing. In the parking lot, wind pushed leaves in small circles, and I felt my life turn toward a truer north. I had proof now, on paper and inside, that I was not the punchline. The account existed, settled and steady, carrying my name like a small flag. It did not change who I was, it revealed who I had been all along. The resolve settled. I would not announce anything. When the time came, the bank account under my name would speak for me. The church hall smelled like coffee and frosted sheet cake, the kind you cut with a plastic knife and serve with a napkin that sticks. Nana wore a cornflower dress and a corsage that kept drifting sideways. Photos looped on a screen near the coat rack, my grandfather young and square, my mother with a crooked bow, me on a porch step with a serious face and a ledger balanced on my knees. The cousins arrived in shades of practiced casual. Cassidy, in a satin jumpsuit, carried a bouquet that leaned like a question. I took my place behind the punch bowl and poured with a calm I had earned. People hugged Nana, pinched her cheeks, told the same stories they always told, and then turned to their phones when the room got too full. Cassidy drifted through the crowd like a boat with the current, collecting compliments, dispensing jokes. When she reached the table, she tapped a plastic cup with her nail and smiled like honey over ice. "Mara," she said, "I added your name to the volunteer list. The first job is trash, the second is more trash." "Happy to help," I said. The words did not taste like defeat. They were just true. I handed her a cup and watched surprise flicker across her face like a thin cloud. The slideshow paused on a picture of my grandfather on the mill floor. His pencil was behind his ear and a tiny smile lived in the corner of his mouth. I felt my throat soften. Arnold, the treasurer, caught my eye from the doorway, tipped his head to the side, and gave me a discreet thumbs up. The roof was patched. The invoice was filed. The county portal showed taxes paid through next spring. Good work, done before anyone arrived, the kind of grace that holds while no one is looking. Cassidy's voice lifted in the middle of a toast. "Here's to the woman who held this family together with tape and prayers," she said, raising her cup toward Nana. The room laughed and murmured. "And to all the cousins who pitched in," she added, her gaze landing on me like a small, bright stamp. "Some of us pitched in more than others, but it's the thought that counts." The old flush climbed my neck, and then stopped. I set down the ladle and walked to the front of the room, not hurried, not slow. People turned. Noise thinned. I took Nana's hands and looked at her the way you look at a map before a long drive. "We love you," I said, my voice even. "You taught us how to stand steady. Granddad taught me something too." I nodded at the screen, where his picture waited like a held note. I pulled a simple folder from my tote. No drama, no fanfare. Inside were 2 receipts and a letter. I handed the first to Nana. Your property taxes, I said. They're paid through next April. I handed the second to Arnold. And the roof, I added. The west aisle is sealed. I handed the letter to my mother, whose eyes had filled already. This explains how, I said softly. Granddad opened a savings account in my name when I was little. He wrote that it was for steady hands. A quiet fell, the kind that is not empty but full. My aunt's mouth made a small O. My uncle blinked like a man stepping out of a dark room into noon. Nana pressed the receipt to her chest and let out a sound like a low hymn. Cassidy took 1 step forward, then stopped, as if she had discovered a step where none had been before. She cleared her throat. You could have told me, she said, and a few people nodded without knowing what they were agreeing to. Her smile was thinner now. We could have coordinated. Posts do better when we tag everyone. I didn't do it for posts, I said, not unkind. I did it because it needed doing. And because the money is mine, legally and cleanly, placed there by a man who knew what he was doing. I did not look down. I did not look up. I said it to the room, the way you say grace, plain and with both hands open. Cassidy's eyes narrowed, quick and sharp. So you've been sitting on cash while I've been fundraising, she said, the phrase slick and practiced. That seems selfish. Cass, my mother said, 1 small syllable, tired and edged. I lifted a shoulder. I've been working, I said. I have always been working. The words were simple, almost soft. And I won't be mocked for it anymore. Silence landed. It did not thud. It settled like snow. Nana reached for me and patted my hand. Your grandfather would be proud, she whispered, and then, louder, with the authority of a matriarch who has earned the right to rearrange a room, sit down and eat cake. People moved again, as if a pause button had been released. Someone laughed, real and round. Someone started the slideshow. Children ran toward the cookie tray. Cassidy stood where she was for a full 3 seconds, then turned and busied herself with plates. No one stopped her to take a photo. No one followed her with a phone. The proof sat in the open, not printed on glossy cardstock or squeezed into a caption. My name on the account, my name on the receipts, my name spoken without apology. When the party ended, I stayed behind to fold chairs. Cassidy came up beside me and held the other end of a metal table. We carried it into the closet like 2 women who had learned a lesson at the same time. You did good, she said, her voice small in the doorway. I didn't know. You didn't ask, I said, and it was not cruel. It was a fact. She nodded, once, as if that answer landed in a place inside her that had been waiting. The hall emptied, and a stillness took the room. The kind that feels like a page turned, not a door slammed. Justice had arrived without a shout. It had arrived on paper, in numbers, with work already done and no need for applause. I gathered my folder, slipped the remaining napkins into a drawer for Nana, and walked out into an afternoon that had become cleaner without changing its weather. I woke the next morning before the sun, out of habit, and let the quiet settle over my shoulders like a shawl. The apartment was still, the refrigerator a steady hush, the windows showing a faint underline of pink between 2 rooftops. I made coffee and stood at the sink, the mug warming my palms, the steam telling me to take 1 more breath before the day began. Money does not solve a soul, but it frees the hands to do better work. I made a list, not on my phone but on paper. The first item was small, buy new dish towels, the thick cotton kind that do not shed. The second was practical, set aside 3 months of expenses in the savings that had my name and my grandfather's patience inside it. The third was bolder: look at office share prices for a little bookkeeping practice. I had 3 regular clients already, friends of friends who needed someone to reconcile a binder of receipts and keep track of invoices. I could build this with the same slow care that had kept me upright when the air went thin. By noon, I had paid the last of the lingering bills and wiped the slate as clean as it gets for women like me. I called the utility company and changed the auto pay to the new account where it made sense. I spoke to Ms. Ramirez again about a savings plan that would not eat itself. She congratulated me like a doctor who has watched a wound close cleanly. Remember, she said, boring is good. Boring is how people buy houses. I wrote it down, laughed, and promised to keep my life gently dull where it counted. In the afternoon, I walked to Nana's for tea. The patched roof held a little sunlight and threw it back at the parking lot, proud and unbothered. Inside, Nana sat with a blanket over her knees and the receipts clipped to a manila folder, labeled Taxes and Blessings, in her careful script. She looked at me the way you look at a grown child you've just met again. Cassidy brought flowers this morning, she said, her mouth amused. She watered my geraniums and asked if I needed anything else. That's good, I said, and meant it. She asked if the account was real, Nana added, a twinkle lighting. I told her it was as real as the work behind it. We ate shortbread and watched a robin pull at the lawn. I thought about how many ways a life can tilt, how many times I had scraped at the floor for change, praying the week would not outlast my wallet. The new steadiness did not erase that woman. It honored her. She had carried me to this table, to this moment, to this small, shining sense of order. I wanted to build a life that would keep honoring her, line by line, with measured kindness. That evening, I moved into a new apartment, still simple, but with 2 windows and a table large enough for ledgers and lemon bars. Louisa helped carry boxes and refused to leave until we sat on the floor and ate takeout with our fingers. To enterprise, she said, clinking her water bottle against the coffee mug I had not unpacked yet. To education, I said back, seeing the word in my grandfather's note, understanding it as more than school. We laughed and let the room teach us its corners. I bought a second-hand desk with a top that could hide cables. I printed a little sign that read, Mara Ellison, Bookkeeping, and slid it into a frame. My first client in the new place was a daycare that needed someone to respect their small numbers as if they were large. The second was a barber who kept cash in a jar and faith in his hands. I synced their accounts, made folders, and built systems that clicked like a lock. It was not glamorous, but it was clean, and it gave me a feeling I had not felt since I was a kid at the porch step, pencil sharp, knee steady, ledger open. I saw less of Cassidy for a while. When I did see her, the edges of her voice were different. She asked questions instead of making claims. How did you set up those transfers? She asked once, holding a cupcake like it might break. I showed her a budgeting template, simple and unadorned, and she looked at it like it was a new language she could maybe learn. Another evening, she dropped off a box of dresses at the church closet without taking a picture. I helped sort them by size and watched her hands move, uncertain and earnest. There was no triumphant coda, no apology written in roses, no audience waiting for our reconciliation. There was a gentler way of speaking, and a gap where the mockery used to be. That was enough. Quiet revenge is not about proving someone wrong. It is about proving your life right, so thoroughly that the old version of you has nothing left to apologize for. I let that definition settle into my bones and found I could stand taller without forcing it. On Sundays, after church, I still help wash dishes in the hall. The roof does not leak now. Arnold hums while he dries. Nana sits under the window with sunlight on her hands. The kids run in circles until someone tells them not to. When I stack the plates, I think about the account with my name on it, not as a weapon, but as a well. I draw from it carefully and refill it with whatever I can, like patience, like skill, like the kind of dignity that does not require an audience. One morning, I opened the top drawer of my own kitchen and found a small brass key, the one from my grandfather's letter. I tied it to a ribbon and pinned it to the corkboard above the desk. It is not magic. It will not open everything. But it reminds me of a man who believed in time, and a girl who believed in numbers, and the way those beliefs met in a quiet ceremony inside a bank, far from applause. It reminds me that steadiness is a choice you make until it becomes the only way you know how to live. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below. And subscribe for more stories of quiet revenge.